There we go. Hi, we have never met in person,
Yeah, no, never.
but the internet is a trippy and wonderful thing sometimes. Sometimes it's a bad thing, sometimes it's a good thing, which is kind of what we'll talk about. Uh,
Mm.
the internet. Can you tell folks just who you are, your work, what you care about, anything you want to share, or nothing?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Awatif. I'm French and but Moroccan too. I always say it. So both my parents are Moroccan, but I was born and raised in France, in Paris. I've been a designer for over 10 years now. And what do I care about? I care about people. I care about design a lot and how it can help people have better lives. I'm a graphic designer, so mostly what I do is try and find the best ways to communicate ideas visually. And this is what I care about the most, I think, a bit too much. I will be judging the menus at restaurants. But yeah, so this is what I do, and mostly nowadays I've been working in branding, so helping companies with their brandings and things like this. So yeah.
I have
Mm.
some of your incredible work in my house, in my kitchen.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and I see it every day, and I love it so much. So yeah, everyone listening should check out and work with or purchase or do anything with Awatif that you can.
Oh,
Okay,
thank you.
so I I've wanted to connect with you in person. I was in Paris. You weren't in Paris. Hopefully, you'll make your way to LA. You're in Korea right now. We're always running around the world, but I really wanted to connect with you for this conversation about liberation because of a little interaction we had recently. But my first question to you is sort of what is liberation?
What is liberation? So I think maybe in English it might sound different, but in French we say liberté for freedom. So liberté, liberation is kind of the same word, right? It's but what is freedom? So it takes me back to when I was a student in high school. We used to have like philosophy classes, and this was like the main topic, like for a long like period of the year. And frankly, the more I think about it, the less I know what is freedom, because I do feel that a lot of us have especially living in the West, or as you said, we travel a lot, so we do have a sense of freedom, being able to just have a passport and go all the way across the world without much of an issue. So I do feel that on a daily basis we may have this feeling of freedom, but then when big events like what is happening right now around the world, or it kind of challenges, are we really free? So I do feel that the more I learn, the less I know about it. But I do feel that liberation is something that we should strive for, and something that, as a community, like human community in general, this is something we should, um, as I said, aim for, but also make sure everybody um, is able to enjoy as much as we can, individually, but also as a community. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Freedom is such a like liberation. I think they're large words
Mm,
with in like dharmic practice they talk about it's these concepts live in what's called the unimaginable, meaning like it's hard to imagine them. It's hard to
mm,
imagine freedom. uh you can have glimpses of it, um but are you really free? What does it look and feel like to say I am free? I always quote Nina Simone here. Nina Simone says
mm,
freedom is having no fear. It says
mm.
no
Yeah,
fear.
I guess I would agree with that. Uh, but there's also always the question of, because you have a lot of types of liberation, right? It can be individual, like liberation of your thoughts, liberation, like physical liberation, so many things. And the thing I struggle the most with, I think, with this concept is mostly in a world where we are not alone. even though our societies are becoming increasingly individualistic, what does freedom mean in the sense of, like there's this sentence like my freedom stops where yours start, right?
Hmm.
But what I struggle with, I would say, because I've been thinking about this, and I'm like, we lose it. Like, I think there's something missing in the sense of, because community, like in my mind, has become more and more important as I grow old, and I realize, oh, actually it's not. I think when you're younger, you think about what you're going to achieve as an individual, right? But then you grow older and you realize, oh, actually I can't achieve much without people, right?
Mm.
Whether it's your parents or your family or your friends or somebody hiring you for that job that you wanted or whatever. And also, am I really free if other people aren't? Like, even if they live very far away, or, as we learn more and more about the struggles that are happening right now around the world and in many places that we have no idea about, am I really free if I ignore it? If I stay in that state of mind of being entertained or happy, like about I have a car, I have my free time, etc. So I think for that, liberation of thoughts, like I think in the US you have this word like being woke, right? That has been kind of taken apart, and but as you raise your consciousness, I do feel that the sense of freedom becomes smaller because you realize all of the things that are happening that you have no control over. So is freedom also about control?
So I guess a real simple question, because you're like, okay, I'm bound up, right? My freedom is bound up with other people, or just I am bound up with other people, and we know that other people are not free, in a traditional and in a non-traditional sense. Like some people uh, are genuinely being oppressed, and that's like literally on the basis level of liberation. Like that's like low. That I think liberation of thought is actually pretty high. Um, I think of liberation in layers. Like we need housing, you need clothing, maybe shelter, food, water, and so a lot of people don't even have that, right? So that saying they're not free, are you liberated? Are you free?
Me personally,
Yeah,
or
you personally.
I do feel I am, in the sense that I feel that I do have critical thinking, and for me, through critical thinking, I do feel free, because even if I'm not able to do all the things that I want to do, um, because I'm a human being with my limitations, I do feel that being able to see it and to acknowledge it and to be able to continue improving on it, it's my personal freedom to say that, oh, I'm not limited to uh, some kind of like my brain is not limited. Basically, it might take time, but I will get to it if I continue working on it. But I would what you were saying about, like having layers, like having a house, and like maybe having shelter is the first one, or liberation. I'm not sure I agree, because you will see, like, sometimes you have homeless people, but they're so free,
Yeah.
because for them it's not like maybe it's not part of one of their, like, their basic needs. Not to say that homeless people are all happy to live outside, but for some people their condition of homelessness isn't stopping them for being free, like, in their minds.
From critical thought, like
So
you just said. Yeah.
mm, yeah, so because they always say the craziest things sometimes, but when you start listening, you're like, oh, actually, this is not so crazy. I may have a house, but I didn't think of this. you know.
I may have a house, but I did not think of that. It's very, very true. Okay, so you are a you are one of the masters of critical thought, I think. Like you reached out to me. I don't want to say early on in the, because I don't want to put it like a
Mm.
timeline on this genocide taking place, but you reached out to me and you said what? You can share it
Oh,
as is if
yes.
you remember.
I'm usually not that nosy, like going and seeing people. But so I went to Chris and I asked him because it wasn't so. So I was thinking, I read your book, right, Brown Enough, and I thought it was so interesting and compelling. And as I was telling you, when I read your book, I felt almost uneasy because I wasn't used to seeing this perspective, to reading this perspective, even though I felt it because so in France, I'm considered an Arab, right? So a brown person. I know it might not always be evident for people to see it because depending on your cultural background, but um, so and it's true that oftentimes when we read about the uh, racial divide in different countries, it's going to be black and white, especially in the US. And I'm very much inspired by what's happened in history in the US. So I've been following, like the civil rights movements and everything. So it was so refreshing to be able to read your book and be able to actually, see your perspective and how it related to mine. So when you didn't speak out about what was happening in Palestine, I was like, oh, why isn't he speaking up? Because I did feel that your voice was so important, right? Because you had been working like very, very vocal about like brown people and their lived experience. So I reached out to you and asked you, oh, how come you didn't speak out about this is happening. You're a writer, you should find that I'm sure you have, like, you would have the best words to express this. But I think I just asked you, oh, how come? Is it because you work in Hollywood? Are there, because also I was curious about this, and genuinely curious. I wanted to get a sense of the atmosphere in Hollywood or in the US in general, because I knew about the atmosphere in France and how I felt. And also, I'm a Muslim, and I'm an Arab, so too, albeit from North Africa. So maybe some people will have like some issues with this too. But I have my own perception of this issue. So I wanted to know, yeah, how come? Because I felt at that moment it was so important that as many people as possible spoke about it, and especially people who are really good with words, because you may have a way to actually touch people in a way that other people wouldn't.
Yeah, so I and then I'll take this part.
Yeah,
I read it, or no, I think it was a voice no, I read it. I read it before we got into
yeah,
the
I
voice
wrote it.
messages. I
Yeah.
read it and it was early in the morning. I was on little sleep, and I got so defensive. I got so defensive about uh my ego, my worth, my work, my anything, my actions. I got really defensive, and then uh, and then I got I angry at social media, which
Mm,
this was a thing before you, and is still a battle, where people share things, um and I feel like, but what else are they doing? And
mm,
that's ego. That's its own bias. That's its own judgment. I'm fully aware of that. Uh, I feel like hitting something at the time before we had spoken. I felt like hitting your thumb on share didn't do anything for the
mm,
world. Um, and then you responded and you were like, yo, I think I pissed you off, and like, it's not my intention, it's not what I meant. And then I
mm,
responded, and then you responded, and then I responded. And uh I'm sort of giving the fast forward version, but I felt like at the time we had one of the healthier conversations that I have ever
mm,
had about something like this. Uh,
mm,
and one of my bigger takeaways from this conversation was, do not, like, do not poo poo action. Like,
mm,
action
mm,
is action, and uh, we can't all go to Congress. We can't
mm,
all write a book. We can't all fly to Gaza. We can't all work on the front line. Some of us can just do this. Do not like make someone feel shitty for the action that they take.
mm,
Action is action. And that was the biggest takeaway I took from our conversation, because I think I did do a lot of, my ego did a lot of like, yeah, but what is this doing in the grand scheme of things?
mm.
It's not actually changing anything. And I loved this convo, and I hope when I've been working on, I asked you if I could transcribe our conversation, and I've been really working through, because that was also a crazy day. Like, you sent me that message, and then this unhoused woman asked me for some like, I assumed she was going to ask me for money, and then she didn't ask me. She was like, yo, can you get me a sandwich from right here? But she didn't mean this place next to me. I was like, yo, that line is crazy. I can't do it. I'm so sorry. And then I felt shitty. I was like, I have time to get her a sandwich. So I got her something at Starbucks. And then, like, it was just this whole experience where I was like, oh, we have so many opportunities to show up in this life with our hearts open.
Mm.
Um, and and so I really thank you for reaching out to me. I thank you
Thank
for
you for taking it this way.
engaging with me again. Um, yeah, what were I don't know, do you have any takeaways from that convo? Did you reach out to other people? Did they have similar reactions, different reactions? Yeah.
No, I didn't reach out to anybody else. I think it was very specific to you, because of the book that you wrote and your work specifically. I thought, oh, this is a person who should be addressing this, and not necessarily addressing this like, oh yeah, free Palestine or whatever. Because if you don't know much about the issue, or maybe you're not comfortable, it wasn't really my intention to make anybody uncomfortable, but more so, I thought, like when you see someone who could, I was like, I'm sure he thinks something so great about it, and I want to hear it. But and it's not uh, my habit to go and reach out to people. Like, everybody do whatever they want to do. Like live and let live kind of attitude. But I'm a big believer in like those small actions, because I do feel that if everybody takes it upon themselves to just say one thing, and we're seeing it happen right now, and I think some people are doing incredible work, right? Um, uh, Saying to the world, like, this is not right. And especially what I saw during that time is that individuals, like in their homes, in their bedrooms, took it upon themselves to go and educate people, and they did the research, and they were creating these pieces of content that sometimes just 30 seconds, but how beautiful was it that individually everybody felt that need. Because, like I told you, I have a friend who posted that. He said, like, as human beings, we cannot be indifferent to one another. And I think this is what was happening, right? We saw something and it touched our humanity. And when I had this conversation with you, I was like, when I heard your voice and you were a bit like, as you said, you were a bit upset. I was like, oh, I think, because I know I was afraid of sounding like this, like, hey, why didn't you speak about it? When in fact it was like, hey, why? Like, well, I was actually curious about it. Is there another reason? And I think as a designer, it's my attitude in general. Like one of the foundation of design thinking is to ask questions to understand, so that we can, move forward. And I was actually surprised, and not surprised, because I did feel that you had it in you to have this kind of constructive conversation. but more so how generous you were with like, also taking the time to listen to me, like some random person you've never met who just tells you, hey, you wrote a book about brown people, so now you have to forever for every single issue be saying something, right? So I did feel, yeah, it was a very healthy conversation and the type of conversation that should be happening, because I do not believe that it is by reprimanding people that we will get to where we want to get. I do feel we are all in the same team. Uh, I know there are like people say, yeah, but they, like kind of creating a divide, but I'm not really about that divide. I really do feel that as humanity, as this group, we do have to look out for each other. I do think that one of it, like the thing that you have is the like the poster you have that I designed will take care of each other, and it's
Yeah.
something that I really believe in. And it's really take care of each other, but take care of yourself. And it's a fundamental of what I believe we should all do. And I did it during COVID. So it because my thinking was during COVID, it kind of brought us together in a way that we had never seen before. And right now, the times are quite violent, but I do feel that we need that, right? And I think this is what we were doing when we had this conversation. We mentally we were kind of taking care of each other in that way of trying to understand each other and not like trying to fight so much. So yeah, I loved it.
I think I was mad. I was mad at the world. I was mad at humanity at that moment because I was in New York City when 9/11 happened.
Mm,
And wow, New York City for 2 days was full of grief and love. Everyone cared for each other. It was really
mm,
beautiful, you know? And then you have to get back to life, and then it just kinda
yeah,
goes away. I was in New York for an insane blackout where I experienced the same kind of thing, like just this generosity and the hearts were opened and we're all in it together. And then we just sort of go back to normal.
mm,
Um, I I have seen what happens when people die that you love. Then you want to tell everyone you love them.
mm,
You and so we get in these habits, right? And then there was a war in Russia and Ukraine, a war that's still going on, and then people are like, oh, let's talk about freedom and this, and it's not fair and blah 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 blah. And then this one, and I guess I got mad at humanity's ability to keep forgetting, like to
mm,
keep returning to the I get inspired and then I move on. My heart opens
mm,
to everyone and then I move on. uh and this is I mean, this might be the human condition. This is like why, if you could actually write the book that didn't have to make people fall into the ditch 1,000 times before
mm,
they woke up, wow, 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 would you be a billionaire? Like, but we do have to fall into the ditch 1,000 times,
mm.
and we do forget. And there isn't a spiritual practice that doesn't tell you that this is a practice of remembering, not
Yeah.
learning. It's remembering, that you are brothers and sisters, remembering that you are family, remembering you are not separate,
Mm,
remembering what really matters, remembering to keep your heart open. And so I think I was angry at that moment at the world, at our ability to forget. I was like, I know this will pass. I know that all this love
mm.
that y'all are pouring out, or this outrage, I know it will pass when your rent is due. And maybe that's fucked up, and like that's not nice thinking or positive thinking, or um but I do but you caught me in that moment, and those moments exist in me with society and with social media, where I say, I just want you to stop forgetting.
Mm.
Yeah.
But it's funny that you say that, because for me, one event that happened that really, I think it's kind of a similar event, but it brought in me something different. So I think it was, I don't know if it's 2004 or something, but there was like a tsunami in Sri Lanka, and so many people died. And And I saw I was quite young, but I think we were about the same age. I was like maybe like 14 or something. And I was surprised because I was looking at the news, and the tsunami happened like maybe 2 or 3 days ago. And, like they were showing people having to actually cook food and eat, and the kids, they had to go to school, and like it was just rubble, but you had like a mother cooking. And I was like, how great it is that we have these basic needs like eating and cleaning ourselves, and like basic things that even in this incredible moment of like a tsunami that destroyed everything, we still have to have our mind like thinking, oh, I have to cook for the kids, or I have to do this, and it keeps us going and keeps us having like a normal life. And I feel that it's kind of a balance thing where, like people die every day, right? So it means that at any time, as we're speaking right now, some people are feeling that kind of thing of love, or saying to people, I love you, I care about you while you're here. And I do think that this is um, a way for us to remember what really matters. But the mundane, the everyday thing, having to cook, having to go to school, having to pay rent, it's what keeps us sane, in the sense that if you were able to just completely abandon yourself to your grief or to your anger without having to care about those little things that are essential for your survival, we would all go crazy.
Hmm.
But because we have to do those things, it keeps us going. And we will have a reminder at some point, but I do feel also we have reminders every day, but we have to train ourselves to see them for what they are. Like I was talking to a friend recently who was telling me he was calling his mother like every week. And I'm like, why not every day? Because I was like, what are you talking about every week? And he's like, yeah, but I'm like, what? Because I'm in South Korea right now, and I call my mother every day. Like I have to. And it's not like it's a quick call, but just to say, hey, mom, I'm alive. How are you? How was your day? My day was like this. Okay, I'll call you tomorrow. But because like you were saying, it's more a question of remembering rather than learning, but I do feel it's both. Like you remember, but then you learn to remember every day. So I call my mother because she's important to me, and we know life is just temporary. So I make sure that from my experiences before of people I may not have had the time to say hello or goodbye or whatever, I'm able to at least call my mother or my sisters or something, every day. And, you have to train yourself.
I
So,
do
yeah.
think of I think of liberation uh like training, like a muscle, like
Mm,
practice, like putting on the seatbelt, like making your coffee in the morning, like as many little uh habits, practices that you can use, mantras,
mm,
um, reminders, uh, physical gestures, as many things that we can do to expand our hearts, to
mm,
expand our awareness, to forget less and remember more. I think of liberation like that. Like you have to practice freedom. Um,
mm. Yeah.
like,
And, before you said that when you were talking about that woman who asked you for a sandwich,
yeah,
and you said you have time to extend, I do think it is that I feel that, you know, the world is due for a revolution right now. This is my feeling, but I think people see revolution well, in like French history. French Revolution has been quite violent,
yeah,
um, but I think people see revolution as this very big thing, right? That has to happen, and it has to be very violent, and oftentimes it is. But I also do feel that it's the small revolutions that you create every day. So instead of ignoring the person because you're busy, it's to create this revolutionary moment of like positivity and also kindness. You say, you know what, yeah, I have time, and I will take the time to do it. And just before this meeting today, I was thinking about, because I was thinking about this subject of liberation, and the song "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised."
oh yeah,
um, I was studying this a little bit, and from what I read, it was more so about the fact that it's not that the revolution is not going to be shown on TV, but more so that it's going to happen in people's minds before anybody even notices. And I think it's in those
Beautifully said.
moments, yeah, that we, we create this revolution to say, you know what, I'm not going to be a slave to what society wants me, like, of the lifestyle society wants me to have, of always being busy, always having like work, and thinking of myself, and and it's more like when you have this small chance of extending some gratitude, uh, or some kindness to somebody else, if it just, like, I think there's a movie like this, if everybody did that, the world would actually be a better place. And I do feel that the world is not such a bad place when you start looking for those moments and observing what's going on around you. But it's kind of difficult because we are busy, right? We do have to work, we are all trying not to become homeless, or to, so uh, yeah, but I do feel that revolution can happen in different ways, but one of them is like these individual moments, that we can actually create.
Gil Scott would be very proud of you right now. Like, what a great, I like love that song. I don't think I've ever thought of it like that. Like, the revolution will not be televised is not about the public awareness. It's about it's an internal revolution
Mm,
first. Like, we have to break through the matrix first.
yeah.
We have to start seeing the programming or the faulty programming.
Mhm,
We have to start sort of loving in little pockets, loving deeper in little pockets before
mhm,
large pockets. Like, and that's a very that's one of those hard to imagine things, right? That, like, you increasing your capacity to love people in your life actually helps the world.
yeah,
Doesn't
definitely.
it doesn't
Mm,
always, you're like, but how can I imagine it? And I think that's something you gave me from our conversation, was like, oh, I couldn't imagine that someone sharing on social media on their story, even though it's a 24-hour timeline, if enough people share from that deep, generous, loving, concerned, compassionate place, it has an effect for good.
mm,
And I couldn't conceive of that or imagine that. Uh, and I think it is expanding our imagination when we think of liberation, that, like, truly doing any act in a liberating way can
mm.
serve others. Yeah.
And also, I would say that my practice in design has helped me a lot with this, because I was mentioning critical thinking before, and as I've been trying to be a better designer and looked into design thinking, and I felt like, because any designer will tell you we're always looking to do other things, because we're naturally people who are very curious. So one day we want to be a baker, the other day but in
I'm
the
right
end I
there with
always
you, I promise.
yeah. But in the end, I always find myself back to design, because I do feel that this practice is first and foremost a practice of love, because the more I learn about it, and the more the first step of design thinking is empathy. So basically, no matter what, if it's designing a website, a house, or whatever, like, I sit with you and I ask you so many questions to understand you, and then design something with you in mind, right? Uh, and I feel that in my relationships with people and in the way I see the world, I use this method quite naturally now, because when you do it like for over 8 hours a day, it kind of becomes like like something automatic. But I realized, I would never be able to design anything good if I didn't listen to the people I'm designing it for, and it requires so much love to be able to. It's like cooking a meal. If you cook a meal for the people you love, you will put so much effort into it. You might prepare like the recipe before, like try to prepare like a nice, like the full meal and the dessert and something. Uh, like, I'm the kind of person I always will think about the dessert first, because I want people to finish on a good note. And I realize, when you design things, you really have to have this kind of love, because you have to put so much energy into creating something for this person or these types of people. Uh, and as I was reflecting on this, because I think my nature was always to share things, like whether, especially if it's like thinking, like when things were starting happening in Palestine, I felt compelled, really, like it wasn't even a thing, but I felt compelled to write about it because design is, I think to be a designer you have to be in an environment where a lot of people are naturally, not naturally, but privileged in society, right? I'm often the only person of color in any of the offices that I work in. It has been like my experience. So I always had to advocate for myself, and explain to people, especially as a Muslim in France. There's a lot of Islamophobia, so I always had this role of explaining to people how I think, why this is like this, and why the crazy things we hear in the office. And French people are very political, naturally, so we do hear crazy things. So I felt compelled to write about it, but then instead of just being angry, because it's not really my nature to be angry either, I felt like, oh, how do I write about it in a way that is received like in the best way? I'm not trying to shame people into writing about things. And I do feel that while I just reached out to you, like some of my posts, some people reached out to me saying, like, I felt like they felt as if I was targeting them. But I think, it's kind of the ego speaking too,
Oh
like,
yeah,
because they
ego.
knew, they wanted to say something, but they didn't. And they felt ashamed, like for the time it took. But I was just saying, it's a process. Like, I know I'm naturally very comfortable with saying anything political. Like, it has been my whole life. So I'm just like, if I don't like something, I will say it. But some people are not naturally like predisposed for that, right? So I'm like, as long as you, like, this is your process, you go through it. But I think everybody would be way more proud of themselves and feeling like freer by just being able to say, hey, I saw this and I don't agree with this. And to be able to advocate for what you think is so important, especially nowadays where everybody has a platform to do so. It might not lead to anything, or so we think, but just this simple fact of building this confidence in you to say when when you don't like something, I think is so powerful. So we talk about the fact that, yeah, like freedom is something that we achieve together, and that we like, it's those small actions that count uh, to achieve liberation for everyone. But I do feel that it does achieve like this first step of creating this little pocket of freedom inside of you, to just be like, yeah, yeah, I can say it. It's like when you encourage like a child to speak in front of a crowd or something, and you see they smile when they did it. I do feel that we all have this kind of inner child inside of us. And sometimes it's scary, especially if you've never done it. But to be able to be proud of yourself in that small moment, I think if we start building this in everyone, it's so valuable, as this community that we create, like this human community. We need people like this. We need people to be confident and to feel like their opinion actually matters,
Yeah.
because this is how we achieve this, like a better environment for all of us, right?
I love the image of a little pocket inside of us
Mm,
of liberation, and
mm.
that pocket just gets pushed. It gets expanded more and
Yeah.
more. The more we touch it, the more we sit inside of it, the more we nourish it,
Mm.
the more we engage with it, the larger the pocket gets, and maybe it pushes the other stuff out the way. Like
Yeah.
uh, that snaps back. Okay, so empathy is step one of design thinking. Do you mind sharing with me the other steps?
Yeah. So first one is empathy. Second one is, I always forget about it. What's the second one? Let me see. Because
Look
I
it
have
up.
yeah, design thinking. I was looking at it just yesterday, but yeah, true. So first one, it's empathy, where we ask so many questions to understand our audience. Second one is define. So based on everything that we heard, we try and define what the problem is. So usually we will use a sentence like, how might we? So how might we help this person achieve this? How might we? So we usually write like the action verbs. So how might we help? Like, uh, allow this person to reach this, I don't know, like this book on this shelf, for example. Um, Third one is ideation. So this is when we expand actually. So the design thinking is like you start big, you define, then you extend, and then you test. Uh, so ideation is where we start throwing ideas and really like be free with it, you know, like good, bad ideas, but based on that question we asked. Then we prototype and then we test. And because it's an iterative process, if you feel like in any of the steps you did wrong, you just go back because you know it's gonna feel like you're gonna feel it. Oh, this is not going in like the right direction. And let's say you got to the test part. The test is very important because this is when you actually observe how people react if your design works. And this is why I love designs because it keeps you very humble. There's no, you know, like if people don't use what you've designed, it means it doesn't work. And there's no hard feelings about it. It's just it wasn't, and it's not about you or anything. Your ability to go back and not like be stuck in your ego is what is going to make you a good designer because you're just observing. Um, and I do think, you know, like when I was observing like what was happening right now. So in Palestine, for example, I've been, you know, I had this, because so many other things are happening at the same time, right? There's like what's happening in Sudan. There are like so many other issues happening at the same time. So I was wondering, oh, how come we hear more about this now? Because what Palestine has been happening for 75 years, right? Uh, so I'm like, oh, what changed in that moment? How come? Why do we care now? Of course, the magnitude, you know, and you know, it was impressive, but you know, like I'm like, how can we create the same, like, how can we get people to care as much for other issues? And then when I observe this, you know, I use the design thinking method and I'm like, oh, so actually, I think I'm sure there are a lot of answers, but, you know, the ability of the Palestinian people to actually document their own, their
Their
own
own plight, their own
situation,
experience. Yeah.
yeah, in a very professional way and in English. I think the English part was very important and the fact that they use social media. And I think internet has changed everything in the way we're going to see this type of issues in the future. Uh, so yeah, so I'm like, oh, so I think they tested a lot of things, but now we found like a formula of how do we get people to care about an issue more, right? So yeah, so yeah, I can recapitulate if you want.
No, I love design. I asked you this question because I'm not sure I've ever heard this very sort of simple term, design thinking,
Oh,
and I can almost guarantee I could spend a lot of time and might spend a lot of time putting it into your life. Like I love that step one is
mm,
empathy. You know, and when I say putting it into your life, I am a big believer that we design our lives. You know,
yeah,
um,
definitely.
w- when assuming you get past that base level of like of needs, right? Liberating
Mm,
needs. I've got food. I've
yeah,
shelter if I need it or don't need it. You know,
yeah,
like enough comfort to start thinking freely.
mm,
um, we get to sort of design our life
yeah,
on a day-to-day basis, on a moment-to-moment basis. We get to design how we react out of anger, with our ego, out of
mm,
love, how we listen, how we don't listen, um, what thing we keep doing that keeps making us feel like shit, what thing we let
mm,
go of. uh, and I just love the idea of design thinking for your life, and then starting with empathy. And then of course you have to test it, right? Like I always
yeah,
say, the laboratory of self. Like you got to put stuff in the lab. Like you want to change, you got to test it in the lab. Like
mm.
you can't just read a book, as an author. Like, or else we wouldn't have a billion self-help books,
Yeah,
because
definitely.
obviously people are reading them, but you ain't testing them in the lab. Like,
Mm,
and something I always say is like, I'm not interested in self-help books anymore. I'm interested in communal health books. And,
mm,
and what is the design thinking around communal health? Because obviously us trying to make ourselves feel better seems to be not working. So how do we make others feel better? and design a better life for them,
mm,
using empathy, using these things, using these ideations, and knowing that that will be reciprocal back
yeah.
towards us. That, like, if I can care for someone else. Hey, do you want to use design thinking to just design the cover of my next book?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
It's going to be about liberation.
Sure.
So engage liberation.
But I definitely agree with you. Always say to people, design, I think we're all designers, but uh, especially as you say, on a day to day, we do design things like the way we dress, the way we present ourselves to people, the way we speak, the way we walk, like there's a lot of this happening.
And
I
we
think,
have more say in it than we often realize.
yeah, definitely. But I think the ability to be a bad or good designer is like, yeah, being a good or bad designer is more like in our ability to observe what works and what doesn't in a very objective way and say, you know what, this didn't work. Let's go back. Maybe I didn't define my issue properly. Let's go back to the prototype. Maybe this dress wasn't doing it for me. Maybe, I have to be true to myself, and maybe I'm going to be wearing this or that, those small things. And it comes back to kind of also being humble, or being humbled maybe by our decisions. And one of the example that I would like to mention is, so Malcolm X is someone I admire a lot because of this. Uh, like, my favorite book is actually his autobiography, because I witnessed, as I'm reading the book, uh, his ability to reinvent himself all the time based on acquired knowledge. And I think this is why he's such a compelling person to read, and to like, there are many videos on YouTube and everything. It's because if you see his evolution, he was a person who was able to say in front of the whole world, mind you, like, oh yeah, I've done this for 10 years, but actually I realized it was wrong, so now I'm doing this. And he does it in front of everyone, and he has no issue saying, yeah, I was wrong. And he has been wrong quite often, like in and very publicly. But I've learned a lot from him in that sense, because I was like, oh, you know what, to be able to go in front of the whole world when the whole world has written articles about you, like, very publicly, it's not even just like you in your room, like, being wrong about one thing. And just come back and say, hey, actually, because I see this image of when he came back from Mecca, and he used to have this idea that only Black people should help Black people, and like there was no space for other people. And when he witnessed in Mecca that so many people from different ethnic backgrounds came together under one religion, and he realized, oh, I was wrong. And he comes back, do this press conference and say, hey, yeah, I learned that I was wrong. Sorry. But now we're going to move on, and we're just going to. And he wasn't trying to play it out like, oh yeah, but actually I was a bit right or anything. He would just say, yeah, I don't subscribe to this idea anymore because I've learned better, and I will do better now. And I think this is what design is about. And I think that this is what we're witnessing now too. Uh, like, I think in the world in general, people are actually thinking about this theme of liberation. Am I really free if the world can do what it wants without my input in it? Or can I have an input in this world, even though there are billions of people? And I think that there's a great power in this, in owning what you think, what you thought, and your own, evolution in this world and in your thinking.
So beautiful. And may we all have the courage and the softness to take accountability for when we're wrong,
Mm,
and how that, and to trust that that's also expanding the liberation bubble inside of us.
mm. No,
Yeah,
true. Mhm.
100%. Do you have any questions for me before we wrap up? You don't have to.
Oh, maybe I do have. So how do you feel free? Like, maybe.
Oh yeah, and I think in moments like like the body of my work before liberation became my deep love uh was enoughness, right? This understanding of am I enough, uh which is so closely related to liberation,
Mm,
um and And like enoughness, there were days where I was like, yes, enough. And there were days where I was like, no, not enough. Need more things, need to be more, need to
Mm,
have more, need to do more. And I think liberation is that same way for me. I understand also that when I'm committed to liberation, like liberation
mm,
first, like um, liberation before breakfast, liberation before food, liberation um, before water, uh it helps, it helps me feel free, and it helps me think critically, and it helps me realize that, like, I'm not free if others aren't free, all these kinds of things. But yeah, I think it's a wave. I'm just trying to live inside of that bubble we talked about
yeah.
inside of us. I'm not just trying to touch it or like poke it, like I'm trying to live inside of it. um and as it grows, I grows, as it shrinks, I
Mm,
shrink. As it shares with others, it touches others, maybe, we connect more.
mm,
um so yeah, there are moments where I feel very free, but there are also moments where I can feel free and simultaneously know, uh I'm an inch away from the worst type of suffering you can think of,
mm,
and I'm also an inch away from the most freedom and love you can think of. Like,
mm.
that's the fine line we're all straddling. um
Yeah.
and we're doing some incredible work to deceive ourselves if we think we're not,
Mm.
like, um, we're all so close to the thing we fear most and to the thing we love most. uh,
Yeah, true. I
yeah,
think it's the human experience, right? Because after all, I mean, we are here. It's very arbitrary. Why are we together here at the same time? In this specific day and age when we invented the internet and now we're using it, but it's still the beginning. When we could have like lived in two separate like periods of time, and there are so many things we cannot control. But I do feel, yeah, it's the human experience. It doesn't have to be like, yeah, I am free all the time. Sometimes, yeah, we don't feel so free when so many we witness things that we're like, oh, how come? If it was me, everything would be like this, that, that. But it's not just me or you, right? So there's beauty in this too. It's the human struggle.
yeah, there's not an analogy that doesn't, like, if you're an athlete, you're not always going to be the best,
Yeah.
and yet you keep showing up, you keep going to practice, you keep shooting shots in games, and sometimes they go in and sometimes they don't, and sometimes you feel shitty about yourself, and sometimes you're like, I'm the greatest thing that ever lived, like. And I think that's the same for my practice with meditation. Like, you, you do it every day, and some days it's just a thing, it's just a task,
Mm,
and some days it reminds you why you do it in the first place,
yeah,
and some days you grow and some days you shrink because of
yeah,
it, like,
exactly.
um right, we keep showing up with whatever practices we believe in, uh which is rooted to our motivation. Like, I often ask people, like, what is your motivation? Like, yeah, I want liberation. Maybe you want to be famous. That's possible.
Mm,
Maybe you want to be rich out of this mind. Maybe you want
yeah.
multiple yachts. Like, you know, maybe you want everyone to have clean water. Like, but what is your motivation?
Mm,
And checking in with that, and not we're not shaming anyone's motivation. We're just like, let's get clear about it, uh, and it may help determine what stays and what goes in the design of
mm.
your life.
Yeah, and it makes me think that when you said that phrase, that you wanted to be a good ancestor,
Yeah.
this really resonated in me because I do feel this is my motivation too, and not so much so to be remembered, but more so that every little thing that I do here, like for example, my grandfather, he moved to France in the 60s, which has completely changed my family's life, right? Uh, I always think, what will I do that will maybe change my family's life for the better? And I do think that this is a good motivation, like being a good ancestor. So you see, this is why I reached out to you. I was like, this guy, he has the words. He should be speaking about this.
I do want to be a good ancestor, and I hope I am. I always say putting medicine in the earth, um, and not when we're dead, but hopefully now. And I think it's in community. Like, I love my community. And you're in that, obviously, and like, when we know our motivation, uh somehow people, and I don't even know how we connected. Like, I don't know how we connected. I don't know how I saw your work. Um, but I know that you you are so tethered to my liberation, enough so that you're like, I'm gonna not call this dude out, but maybe, yeah, call this dude out, or just get curious with him, and it's led to so much
Mm,
of the liberation bubble expanding. And so I genuinely thank you. Yeah, thank
mm.
you. Thank you for your mind, and your designs, and your
Well, thank you.
thinking, and your heart, and how you move through the world. Really, thank you.
Wow, and thank you for allowing me to speak about this, because you given me also the opportunity to express myself on this subject, even though I have been expressing myself, but not so much so like maybe with my family or people around me. But um, actually, I realized that in the everyday space, we don't all care the same way about the same subject. So it's kind of difficult to be able to actually take some time and reflect on one specific subject, especially like liberation. So I thank you in return.
Hey, can you tell people listening where they can see your design, or they can meet you, or hang out, or contact you, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on Instagram. So my handle is Awatif, AWATIF. I also have a website, is awatif.fr, like France. Yeah, you can find me in those two places.
I'll put all that stuff in the post. Hey, do me a favor. This is gonna end up in the podcast, but
Yeah,
send me a JPEG of what I have in my kitchen. Take care
yeah,
of each
sure.
other, because I'm gonna put it as our cover for this.
Okay, no problem. I'll send it to you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm grateful for you.
I'm grateful for you too.
Ciao.